I don't think care and support for universities is up there in lights at the moment, and that of course reflects the fact that universities don't have a lot of friends in some circles. Our social licence is at a low ebb. We've had polling show that many Australians don't think positively about universities anymore, and we've also seen a tidal wave of regulation that's hit universities. I think some justified, much of it you'd have to say why. And in fact, the answer to why is because we're not trusted in the way we were. And it means that as a sector, we're being micromanaged increasingly without a clear sense of how we can grow and support the nation. And if anything, we're being held back in areas where in fact we can deliver in spades for Australia. In fact, I know there's stress, including at my own university, and that's partly because of the financial pressures that so many universities are under. When you take the fact that the domestic market is tight, in fact some categories of students are going down, we're limited as to international students, and also you've got job-ready graduates, which means the real decrease in funding is starting to bite strongly. All of those things means that universities are under pressure. But it's not just that, it's the fact that we just don't know what the future is. It's not clear where we're heading as a sector. There's a big election coming up in a few weeks, markedly different visions, one would say, but in fact it's actually not entirely clear even what those visions are. How would managed growth work? Or if the coalition wins, what does that mean? So I think when you put those things together, some financial stress, geopolitical uncertainty, and a lack of clarity about the competing directions, we only have to look at America or the UK or other countries to see that unis are vulnerable, with our social licence at a low ebb, with community understanding of what we do, often misaligned with what we actually do and deliver. It means as a sector that we need to get our act together, otherwise we're in danger of being overtaken by even more regulation. I think it's also fair to say that the unis, we've let ourselves down in areas. We've certainly let the community down when it comes to unpaid wages. We've let the community down in other areas historically with regard to sexual assault, harassment and the like. But in that area we're lifting our game and there's big improvement. In fact, I'm really proud of what we're seeing in the sector. But there are other flashpoints as well, like VCs pay and other issues which are a constant topic of community conversation. And to my mind, we've just got to go on top of those issues. We've got to be in line with community sentiment. We're public institutions for the public good. And for our social licence, if we want to avoid more regulation because we're not trusted, we've got to take charge, and rather than this being foisted upon us, as a sector actually solve these problems in ways that are in line with political and community expectations. The cost of regulation is already prohibitive for many universities, and sadly much of that regulation doesn't make sense. It actually drives compliance behaviour, but not actually behaviour that is in the national interest. A good example is the foreign arrangements scheme that we had introduced a few years ago, where we have to register these arrangements. Nothing much seems to happen. You don't actually get them vetoed, and so a lot of staff focused on compliance, but is it actually driving more productive behaviours? Not much evidence that it is. And that's again a reflection of the lack of trust of universities and a desire of government to intervene. What we need is regulation that's focused on unis delivering on their mission, that rightly gives room for autonomy, independence, but we're not there at the moment. And my fear, in fact, is that momentum is building for more regulation and a more stifling of the sector, as opposed to letting us thrive. I think if universities are concerned about the regulation, we've got to win back public trust. You get regulated when the public doesn't trust you, is concerned about whether you're true to mission. Politicians naturally respond to that, and we have to repair those relationships. We have to, as a sector, demonstrate through our actions. We've got to listen with humility to show we actually understand where the community's coming from. We've got to take action that actually reflects those issues as opposed to hoping they go away. And then most importantly, we've got to be a sector that actually, in line with community expectations, delivers for students, starting of course with Australian students, given we're Australian universities, and then delivers on our research and our other mission. And I think by being true to that and communicating it, that's the secret to actually ending up with a sector that isn't in the news for the wrong reasons, but is because of the wonderful work we do in actually giving people a better life. My view is that as public institutions, it's right that our salaries, not just VCs, but other senior executives, are benchmarked against public service benchmarks. In fact, I'd favour asking the Remuneration Tribunal, which already sets the salaries of senior public servants, to set the salaries of University Vice-Chancellors. And that would be an evidence-based, benchmarked process that would take the heat out of the system I think actually would still find very high salaries. It's not as if public servants are underpaid at top levels, but it actually would be defensible. And I think through that process we'd be able to communicate to the community that just as other public sector's bodies have a rational, defensible basis, so do we. I think the starting point for the sector is some humility in these issues. That's not easy for universities, and as universities we're used to talking from up high, talking about the way it is, reciting facts, providing expert evidence. This is uncomfortable territory for universities because we do have to take a step back and listen with humility, which means actually a level of empathy and acceptance of what people are saying. And it's not good enough just to say we think you're wrong, or good enough to say we've got a better idea. I mean, social licence, community engagement actually means a bit of compromise and understanding. And it also means universities need to act on some of these uncomfortable things, because if you listen and don't act, that makes it worse. We've actually got to, for example, on VC salaries and other issues, demonstrate we've heard and change is needed to ensure that people actually understand.